Everyone, and welcome to the Cloud Architects podcast. I'm happy today because I saw a calendar entry recently that's popped up and said it's our 10th anniversary. We've been going at this for around 10 years now, guys. 10 years, over 100 episodes, and I think it's really, really cool to still be doing this. Mm-hmm. And today we got Claudia. Claudia, how are you?
Thank you, Warren. I'm great. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
We were remarking at the beginning of the recording that we tend to be aging just a little bit, some of us anyway. But, we are. Look at Nick. Nick, you guys just look better now than we did 10 years ago, essentially is what I'm saying. And we were also joking about how every day is Warren Day. So we're super happy to have Warren with us today. And as Warren said, we have Claudia Perez joining us. And Claudia, do you want to just tell folks a little bit about yourself, what you do? We'll get into why you're here in just a second, but let's introduce yourself to the people.
Thanks, Chris. I've been working in modern work and security and infrastructure probably for the past 15 years now. I've been in Australia for about 18 years, originally from Colombia. I came from Colombia all the way to Australia and started doing my IT degree. As I started working in desktop support, I started to get interest in working more on the infrastructure side. Just as I had that experience in end user compute, I started to see where the pattern was, where the learning opportunities were there, and organically moved into areas and project areas of the company I used to work for at the time. Was an energy company in Melbourne. So I decided to move into consulting about 5 years ago, and I love it. Don't regret the decision. I miss certain things of being part of an internal team, but I love consulting, which is where Chris and I are, and this is how we met. And so here we are today.
I think that's really interesting, right? Because one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you was around your experience on modern work, end user computing, and talking about Windows 11 and modern management, those types of things. But you just brought up something really interesting that we care about a lot on this show, which is the human side of IT, right? Not everyone has this linear path into their careers. Most cases, when you're a doctor, you like things that doctors do. You go to school to become a doctor. After many years of doing that, you become a doctor. But in IT, people tend to find their way into it through different ways. And maybe they've done some sort of other degree before, and then eventually they find their way in. So I think we should definitely circle back to that as well, because it's really interesting to hear you talk about how you sort of found your passion for consulting. And I'm sure there are folks listening to this as well that may be working in customer-facing teams right now who are going, every now and then we see those consultants around, and what they do seems interesting. I think we should definitely circle back to pick your brain on that. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, look, it's definitely become a passion for all the projects and all the diversity that it is when you're at a consultant. So you're not only focused on modern device management, which is what we're talking about today, and what we do with Windows Autopilot, but it's also the underlying part of what underpins everything that we do in user compute and device management. It's the users, identities, security, it's infrastructure, it's network, it's so much more. It's cloud, it's applications, it's so much more than just a silo part of what we do in IT.
Nick has been very polite. He's raising his hand. And I'll be honest, I don't actually even know how to do that on this platform, but I'm going to let Nick speak because he raised his hand.
I'd love to start with maybe a little bit of a contentious question, Claudia. I thought the world was moving to Mac and Linux, and we were using W365 on the side, and I thought Windows is dead. And here you are doing complicated Windows things. Is Windows still a thing?
It definitely still is. For a lot of businesses, still is. Yes, we have moved to the cloud. Like, the pandemic really helped to shift that mindset of like everyone has to be in the office and we all have to have our laptops or desktops. And back then we had like big pieces of desktops that will sit under the desk, and that's how we were working back then. But then we moved into laptops. Here we are. So why is it still a thing? And it also comes back to data security, really, is actually one of the biggest ones at the moment. It's how we access resources through an organization where we can actually still have visibility of what users are accessing. We have a device today that we can manage, we can see, we can monitor, we can protect. That is still the principle. The principle hasn't changed from what it was back then, where we were all in the office and working from a dedicated workspace, that hasn't changed. It's shifted to a more hybrid workforce. We've got the opportunity to work from basically anywhere, anytime. Windows 365, yes, it is becoming more of a trend now. And I guess that is solving a lot of problems in terms of big organizations, especially in the banking industry, for example, where they've got resources all around the world, where they just don't have the capacity, the funding, and the IT admin overhead to handle, 30,000 computers at the same time. Of course, they're going to move to something like ADD or Windows 365. And for that specific use case scenario, it is a massive step up in the industry and where we're moving with cloud solutions. But we still have local companies that is still wants that hybrid approach where we still want the users to be in the office a couple of days a week, working from home, or even working from anywhere that they want, but we still want to protect access to resources in a way that we have clarity of what that access is. Essentially is really a lot about data security, and it's a lot still tied to how some environments that is still traditionally managed. So we still have hybrid joint environments. We see that a lot in consulting, and especially in the UC, we still have businesses that are still in that traditional model where they've provisioned computers on-premise first. They're still in that journey trying to move to the cloud with hybrid joint computers between Active Directory and Entra, but it's a journey. It's not something that they just can do in one day. And so having that heavy reliance on on-premise infrastructure like print servers, file shares, applications that are still hosted on-prem still requires either a physical device to access those resources, or they require access to other third-party partners like Citrix, AWS, or any other partners that allows them to have that access to those internet resources. I think it's still a thing, and it's going to be there for a little while, in my opinion.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question, but before I hand over to Warren, because he's been waiting patiently with his hand up, and I know that you make your point about local resources, but with local resources comes the need to protect those resources. And something that happened this week was the yellow key BitLocker bypass vulnerability that was published for free on GitHub by a disgruntled researcher. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody about that earlier. Look, it all comes down to how we protecting those resources internally. I mean, there are modern ways to actually configure things like BitLocker. So what are we doing today with BitLocker? Is it actually serving the purpose as it was before? Of course it is, but are there other mechanisms to secure BitLocker, not just through policy, but through certificates? I was actually reading an article from Dell the other day, how they actually even protect your BIOS configuration, BIOS settings, even your default hardware settings based on certificates. So is it a better way of doing it rather than just someone having access to export all these BitLocker keys and then just publicly exposing this information out to anyone?
I think mine's actually a follow-on question to that. Is I saw there was, working for Microsoft, we see some of these things flying around all the time. There's this certificate update thing that's happening now, right? Where all of the TPM certs are now needing to refresh on all of the local devices.
Yeah.
How much of a circus is this going to be? Because I'm stressing. I mean, like, we look at how long it took for customers to, MFA. So MFA just now, since like 3 years ago, we started making it mandatory. Now customers are worried about service accounts. They're like, what's going to happen? Well, maybe you should have looked at it 3 years ago when we told you to. And then front door's DigiCert policy also changed like 2 years ago. Now, it's like literally a week before it was supposed to change. People are like, what do we do now? Everything's going to break. We're like, yeah, we gave you warning. So now, how much of a circus do you think this is going to be?
I mean, if people have been proactive rather than reactive, or if companies have been actually planning for it, it should just be seamless, but also comes down to also your engagements with your hardware and manufacturer resellers who do, who sell these devices to you, like talking about Dell, HP, Lenovo. One of the challenges actually we're talking about this with our current client is that new hardware is supposed to have come in the past 12 24 months actually with this new certificate, but it's not always the case. We found that there are new devices that were purchased in the past 24 months that are still using the old certificate. So like you say, nightmare, it just never ends. It never stops. I think it's a conscious thought, not just around Microsoft and how Microsoft is doing what they need to, because they announced this a few years ago. We knew this was coming. Is how proactively we work with partners and vendors to also align to what Microsoft is releasing. That will be my principle. We're actually working with our current client to see how we're going to mitigate the risk.
It raises interesting conversation about other parts of the management environment though, right? If you are proactive and taking the right steps to, for example, mitigate something like that, you're probably also then thinking about how you patch your machines, how you manage settings and baselines and all of that type of stuff on your machines, versus some organizations who probably haven't even finished upgrading from Windows 10 yet, right? And we're just talking about Windows 11 here, just assuming everyone's gotten to Windows 11. But I would venture to guess that there's probably a very large sort of cohort of folks that haven't quite got that Windows 11 migration even done yet. And now you're already behind the eight ball, because not only are you rushing to get a Windows 11 migration completed and get rid of Windows 10, but you probably haven't had the time then to focus on, well, how do we image these machines? Like, what are we doing as far as like reinstalls and imaging? Are we using Autopilot? Are we not using Autopilot? What is Autopilot? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's an interesting conversation here. I wanted to ask, what are you seeing with customers out there generally as far as their maturity for managing Windows?
It actually varies, Chris. It is different from each business. I guess the more traditional way is still that hybrid join environment posture, where there's still quite resistance to move away to a cloud-first approach and move away from traditional device solutions like SCCM or MECM. Yeah, that is mostly what we see in bigger organizations. I'm talking about 3,500, 4,000 and higher devices. I think they were still quite resistant in making that big shift on managing devices directly in Intune. So then they find ways to still traditionally manage devices in SCCM. And so then we'll talk about things like Autopilot. Well, they also need to start looking at it not just from a product kind of think of what Microsoft releases, whether it's SCCM or Intune or Entra and Active Directory. Like cohesively, Microsoft has built these solutions or these new cloud-first solutions to talk back to what it was traditionally provisioned before, because the fundamentals are actually built upon those, upon Active Directory or SCCM. Take advantage of that co-managed state and start shifting all the workloads over to Intune. So if you've got applications, policies, anything that is currently managed through SCCM, make sure that those workloads start being shifted across to Intune first. That's one first advice. So when we see an organization that's still in SCCM, they've got Intune, but they really don't know what to do with Intune for Windows or Mac. They just traditionally have started using Intune for mobile device only for iPads, iPhones, and Androids. Now that understanding that Intune is actually going to become this modern device management solution that still has a lot of the capabilities, not all, from what SCCM has. And I always say this even with clients, because I love the reporting side of things in SCCM. The reporting is so robust. There's so much more that you can do in SCCM that you still can't do through Intune. It's matured a lot more than what it was about 10 years ago. But that will be the first thing that I'll start from, is like start that journey from that. If you've already started in that co-managed state, then have a look what's left in SCCM. Is it your applications primarily? Is it updates? Microsoft already has Windows AutoPatch. It's a much automated, easier process to handle updates. And this is why Microsoft built this for us, for the engineers, that we would struggle every month having to configure either download the update, package the update, then push it out, and then to be able to push an update monthly. Then it came down to ADR rules in SCCM. I love ADR rules, and it's actually how AutoPatch is kind of like built upon. It's automatic deployment updates. That's exactly what AutoPatch does. So make sure that you've got those principles right. Configure your AutoPatch deployment rings based on what fits your business needs, but also make sure that you also have that zero trust model in place when you're configuring Windows AutoPatch. So one of the challenges that I have, and this happens a lot with a lot of clients, is they're very hesitant to deploy firmware and driver updates, for example. And it's actually one of the biggest vectors and one of the biggest vulnerabilities that we see is actually not patching drivers. But they're quite resistant because it's the fear that if I deploy this driver tomorrow, oh, my speakers are going to stop working, my screens are going to stop working, my mouse is going to stop working. That used to be the case for the most part when partners didn't work so closely with Microsoft, but that has changed a lot. We see Microsoft working really closely with partners to make sure that the drivers are included as part of the monthly updates that we get, or any regular updates, but that means. So I think that shifting that mindset that everything is going to break if I automate these processes. The automation is there for a reason. Just start leveraging that automation because it's going to make your life a lot easier. And instead of becoming a reactive role that we do in IT, and especially in EUC, moving to a more proactive approach that, well, now I've got all my patching and all my updates as part of my AutoPatch regime, then I can move into what do I do with the applications that I've got left in SCCM? Well, I need to shift these applications over to SCCM. What do I do with them? Can I just simply migrate them? Usually, and this is the principle that I say to clients, if your applications can be packaged in SCCM today, they can absolutely be packaged in Intune. It's just a wrapper. That is really just the principle. So start looking at your app catalog in SCCM. How many apps do you actually have? We sometimes see customers, they say, oh, we've got thousands of applications in SCCM. You don't really actually have that many applications. I have never really come across a business that doesn't have like top maybe 300 apps. So that will be another part of the journey. Start looking at what that application landscape looks like for a business. If those applications can be packaged in SCCM today, they can be moved over to Intune, then migrate them. So start working through that assessment of applications that you need. Move only what you need. Don't shift and lift. It's always easier when you see Intune, even if it's already operational. Don't see it as a brownfields environment. Maybe try and look at it from a greenfields environment because it's your opportunity to start fresh, to build something clean and new that you don't have to shift everything and all the legacy problems that you had. And then it comes down to group policy. Group policy is our biggest nightmare when it comes to.
I was just going to say, what about group policy, right? We've all grown up with group policy. Group policy is almost as old as we are.
Yeah.
Many of us started with Server 2000 and playing around with group policy. And I feel like for a lot of admins and businesses, it's really hard to let go of that control because you can tweak absolutely everything. For years, there's always been this sort of perception that, Intune is not as good, Entra is not as good, we can't do the same things. But I feel like that's either changed or is changing, isn't it?
It definitely has matured a lot. And that's what I said before. It's not what Intune was 10 years ago. It is a lot more robust. We've got security baselines, just the same as we did in group policy. And when we say to our customers, hey, let's just build this as a greenfields approach. That's actually where we start from. Start from the baseline. Start from your Windows 365 apps, Edge, just the top ones that you need for your baseline. Then look at what's left in group policy, what's critical for your business to operate. That anything, is it a specific security framework that you need to align your business to? Because that is not just shifting the policy because it works today in group policy on Windows endpoints. It's going to work exactly the same in Intune, and we require that way. Look at first, what is your legal requirements from a business an industry point of view? Is it a particular regulator that requires you to have a specific security framework? Then build your policy set in Intune according to that as well. So you basically keep doing two things at the same time. Essential 8 is one of the biggest ones. We did that with one of my colleagues last year, Arlen Hips from Essential 8. There was Essential 8 level 2 uplift, and it was challenging because that is actually when you go into a more restrictive environment. But if you do that journey, instead of like shifting all the stuff that I had from GPO over to Intune, but you start fresh and you look at the guidelines for what's required for the business, what essentially that's required. Okay, now this is actually the templates that I have to build and configure in Intune rather than just like, let's just migrate everything because that's how we've got it today.
Yeah, and Essential 8, for those who are not familiar, that's a very Australian-specific framework for securing endpoints and a whole bunch of things mandated by the Australian government, but very similar to like the CIS or NIST or any of the other standards that you may be used to in other parts of the world. It's a good point, the whole build from scratch greenfields thing, because oftentimes people are too scared to touch those policies because they've always been there, they've always worked, but we don't really know what's going to break when we start unraveling them. When you get back to that whole, like, let's start with the requirement and let's build from there, you end up getting rid of a lot of crud and a lot of stuff that is potentially slowing down logon performance and messing up user experience, right? Because now you're actually just building the things and using the things that are relevant to your business today, not 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And it's a fresh set of policy. And you're actually also then mitigating the threats that are relevant today, because that's the other part of this is like, well, we've got all these security controls, right? But what are the threats that you're trying to mitigate? Are they the blaster worm from 2002, or something more relevant and more actual that is an actual threat today in 2026? Why would you care about something that isn't relevant anymore? Why carry that across and bring that tech debt with you? So really, really interesting point. You mentioned the word zero trust there, and zero trust Nick over here, his eyes sort of lit up. And so I was waiting for him to jump in with some sort of profound question, because, you know, we can't talk zero trust without ZT Nick joining the conversation.
Before I do that, I want to acknowledge Warren's hand has been up.
I just wanted to say that is probably the most profound thing that I've heard in a monologue in a long time. Thank you, Claudia, because I'm going to take the transcript of this podcast, turn it into a white paper, and then just give it to every single customer I work for, because they don't see it that way ever. Like they will fight me about why Microsoft doesn't have this particular feature, which they've had in group policy for God knows how long. When in actual fact, if they just had to start from scratch, look at the requirements, they would see that. Every single thing that you said is exactly what everybody sees. It's the golden standard. Is why doesn't Intune do this? Well, because it doesn't have to.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's like, does it really need to do that?
No,
it doesn't. There's another
No, I
control.
think it's
There's
great.
another way. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Again, there's always so many different ways of doing things, but they get so baked into a way of what they can see, or something that they've been used to doing. But as an architect, I mean, you know, whether you're building a network, whether you're deploying servers, doesn't matter what you're doing. There's probably 17 different ways to do the same thing. And there's probably 100 different products as well. But if you're doing it the Microsoft way, I mean, you don't have to do it the old way. You can do it the new way. And I don't think that a lot of customers see it that way. So that's great. I think that's going to be like the whole description of this podcast.
And I think one other thing would be, look, you don't have to solve all the problems all at once. It's what we said, and even in our current the current challenges that we have with Chris is that we've told them is that start small, start from what you understand, and we were talking about this with one of my colleagues earlier in the week, because he's done a lot of identity projects over the years, and I was talking to him because I had some conflicts around conditional access policies and us trying to solve a problem because the fundamentals have been missed. What one of our clients is trying to achieve. And I was talking to him, and like, I really hate the cliche of like, this is a journey, but it really is a journey. It continues to be a journey. Modern work in particular, it is always a moving target. End users are essentially the people who consume everything that we're configuring in the back end, whether it is an application, whether it is network, whether it is security, identity, it's the end user. So it's always going to be a moving target. But one of the things that I always say to people is that start small, but start in the right direction. Have a roadmap strategy. You might not be able to solve everything in 6 months or 12 months, but if you do have a roadmap strategy, it definitely works. We did that actually before I moved into consulting, and when I was working for an energy company, we started there. We started with a roadmap strategy, and as part of an EUC uplift project during the pandemic, which was massive and challenging because we were also used to having everything and everyone in the office. We had to put our brains together and work really quickly with really great consultants that came to work with us at the time, people who have learned so much over the years, and they've been mentors in my own career. But we had to work so closely with them to come up with quick solutions, but we had to start somewhere without forgetting where our vision was going to be. And so starting that journey, have a clear vision, work with your enterprise and domain architects to understand where the business needs to be in the next 5 to 10 years from a regulatory compliance, from a security point of view. Once you understand where those concepts are, then your EUC roadmap strategy basically just follows. And these EUC uplift projects, usually they uncover a lot of underlying issues, or a lot of underlying things that we haven't seen.
And that it's going to change as well, right? Because the Intune that is today is not going to be the Intune that is of 2 years from now. So while you're on the journey, whatever strategy you choose needs to adapt, especially with this whole AI thing that's happening now. And I mean, I guess a follow-up question before I hand over to Chris is like this whole Copilot on the PC thing. I personally don't see it. I'm quite happy using a third-party app or quite happy using an application that works inside my browser. I don't know if it's quite there yet. I don't know. I'd like to get your take. Have you seen, do customers just disable Copilot with Intune and they're like, nope, this is not happening?
It actually was a bit like that a couple of years ago when it was just all like, we were starting to talk about AI and Copilot and what our users were going to be doing with Copilot. How is that data going to be protected inside the environment? And that was essentially why it was actually more fear and reaction rather than proactive and planning. So the principles of when we talk about Copilot and how do we integrate that organically in the business, allowing people to actually use the tools because they're there for a reason. And look, they're going to find ways to use them, whether it is on the corporate device or not. So you should start trusting your users, but protect your data first, because that should really be the principle. If you start with the principle of how am I protecting data, how am I following this zero trust model of less privileged access, of device compliant identity, everything that comprises into that zero trust model, then you can introduce Copilot safely because you've got protection in your environment that allows you to have control still of what users have access to, but also you ensure that your data isn't exposed and users have the ability to also leverage these AI tools to make sense for the work. Like that's the whole point of AI, is to optimize how we do things today, is to allow us to have enough time to not be reactive anymore, to be more proactive with other activities. That's the way I see AI. And I always say this to even my husband at home when we talked about Copilot. He also works in IT. To me, it's allowing me to spend less time doing all these mundane tasks of putting together all this content that I used to have to spend days to have to put together. Now I can just do it really quickly. Still need to review it because the human factor doesn't go away. I still need to make sure that what I'm talking about is exactly what I want to present and what I want to share with our clients or with our peers or anyone that I'm presenting to. Usually use it mostly for that. So the human factor isn't going away. We still need that human thinking because we are the ones who strategize. We're the ones who understand the business complexities and the challenges and the problems with the end users and so on. So that human factor isn't going anywhere. But if you're protecting that data for the business, if you're protecting data for users, companies, clients inside your own environment, then you can safely allow your people and trust your people to use those tools. And they'll feel more empowered to actually learn how to use these tools better and more, I guess, consciously of what they're doing. Yeah, so that will be my take on that.
I was going to say there's a couple of themes that I want to touch on there that you mentioned. One of the things was, users will find a way. Well, Warren, yes, they will, because Microsoft hides Copilot bloody everywhere, right? If you take it off my app, I'm just going to go into Outlook. I'll find it there. And if it's not there, I'm going to go into M365 and I'll find it there. But Copilot is everywhere, so you could always find it. But more seriously, though, the theme of just being proactive, right? Because I think we're also getting to a place now where historically, businesses and organizations have struggled with patching and patching cycles and stuff, right? When we've always gone, we have Patch Tuesday and we spend a whole month getting ready for Patch Tuesday and then we'll patch. I feel like that's not going to be enough anymore, right? When we think about what's happening with things like Mythos and AI's ability to find vulnerabilities, we're going to have vendors using that technology to patch vulnerabilities. And we're going to get to a point where we're going to be getting patches thick and fast for a little while. Eventually, I think it'll sort of taper out and it will right itself. But we're going to very soon, and the UK government have been warning about it. Like everyone's warning about this at the moment, is we're going to be very soon entering a place where if you can't patch your fleet very quickly, you're going to be in trouble. Right. And so that sort of theme of being proactive, I think, is really, really important because patches are coming, people. Like every vendor is going to be pushing out a ton of patches once they start using AI to analyze their code and all of that. So if there's one thing you want to be doing right now is getting yourself ready for that, I think.
Yeah. But what you just said there is quite profound. The patches are coming and very few of our customers, I think, are ready to have rapid patch adoption cycles because a lot of our customers were still trained to follow a practice. And that could have been having a ring 0, ring 1, ring 2, ring 3 type of approach. And when we look at modern patch methodology, Claudia, is that still a thing? Do we still want to adopt a ring methodology when we look at YOLO key being released this weekend? Let's assume we want to roll out a UEFI patch to lock down USB, right? Are we able to do that? Is that still a methodology that we should follow? So the whole staggered ring thing?
It's still a big thing actually. And it is a thing not just because we're trying to delay patches, it's from an operational point of view is usually where we see it. So from an IT operations point of view, if we release patches on 0 day when they are released, that's great. Patches at apply, fleet is compliant, everyone is patched. In a small organization, it works really well. And for the small companies that I've worked with in Australia, for smaller clients who have like less than 100 or less than 200 devices, it's easy. And that's how they do it. That actually, and I was saying this to one of my colleagues, is that you see smaller companies are actually one of the most secure ones these days because they go with all the core principles of zero trust today. So that's great. Companies is a lot more challenging though, because we look at it from an IT operations point of view. If we release patches today and there's a bad patch that's applied and it's going to cause major impact to end users, then productivity is going to be affected. IT is going to be overwhelmed with how many things that can they resolve? Can they actually roll it back really quickly like we used to do from things like, in SCCM when you pause the patch and then just install or push something else to uninstall that patch. It doesn't work that way for bigger organizations that haven't seen it. So that's probably where there's probably some hesitation around just let it just do 0 day release, just automate it and let it flow through the environment. I mean, you still have control over how long that takes though. And that's the beauty about deployment rings. Doesn't necessarily have to wait 2 weeks until you apply the next patch. Start from your first 2 deployment rings. We always do it in this concept with one of my colleagues. This is how we've always done it. It's worked really well. Start with your test pilot group, IT pilot, business pilot. If everything goes well in those 3 deployment rings, let everything else go because you've got some assurance that nothing's going to break. But don't wait a month for you to actually release those patches. Just a week and a half. If nothing's breaking, everything's fine, everyone's happy, allow patches to apply gradually to every device in the fleet.
It's an interesting conundrum because we don't use test environments really anymore, do we? I remember working with large customers in the past years ago where they had exact duplicates, right? And we had processes of exactly how we would go from dev to test to prod through this. Even testing a patch would involve weeks of first go to dev, make sure nothing breaks, then go to test, make sure nothing breaks, then go. But we don't really see that anymore. I mean, I suppose in a software development context, I'm sure that probably still exists somewhat. But most customers I work with don't have representative dev and test environments of their prod environment, right? From a licensing perspective, it's too expensive to have an exact representation. So you kind of have either close enough or you just YOLO and you're just patching and working in your prod, right?
Claudia, I want to ask a closing question as we come towards the top of the show. We've talked about a lot, and there's a lot of guidance that you've given us, and we're very grateful for the guidance. And customers listening to this may go, oh my gosh, where do I start? Bear in mind, we talked about greenfields, brownfields. A lot of us are in some kind of a hybrid. I'm doing something with Intune, and I realize, listening to you, that patching is still a thing. It's much bigger of a thing, and management is even a larger of a thing based on what we've just uncovered. So where did they start and what did they do next?
That's a great question, Nick. There isn't really a straight answer for everyone. Like we were saying before, it is a journey, but it's thinking about how we've changed in the modern world and what we do today. What is it that we're trying to protect? Our users. Where do we start from? Their identity. Start from that identity. Understand how that identity works today. Start from that core principle. Start that journey understanding identity is the new perimeter. It's not just the device, it's the user identity. Start from that first, will be my first advice. Look at how they are accessing your resources today. When you start looking at how they access resources, you understand what are the key core requirements for those resources to be accessed. Are they still on-prem? If that is still on-prem, well, how are we going to allow those users to access those resources if we want to move into a cloud-first solution? Start looking into what Microsoft to allow you to be in that transition model when you've got this EUC roadmap strategy that you want to do I want to move my devices from this traditional on-prem provisioning process into Windows Autopilot or cloud first only or Windows 365, whatever it is. Understand your identity first. That will be my first advice. Then your data security posture. Understand your data security posture in the environment as well, because we're protecting users, we're protecting data. Those are the two key, most important things that I see in an environment these days. The device, yes, of course, hardware is important, and we want to make sure that our users are productive, and we want to give them flashy and nice Windows devices or Mac OS or whatever it is, you name it. But if a device gets lost or stolen, what is it that you care the most? Identity and data. Start from there, start protecting those. And if you want to start the transition, okay, you've got these two concepts clear. You know where your identity lives, what you want to do with it, and you got your data protected. If I want to move my device from being traditionally provisioned by AD or SCCM or whatever tool you use on premise to Autopilot, start building Autopilot. Autopilot is actually mature so much. There's actually a new release with the Autopilot V2, which has got some really great features as well on how to automate the process and make it even easier for the users. Actually a more lightweight process that it used to be for that traditional device provisioning. So start building just a standard SOE, just a standard operating system where it's got the basic apps, just your core Microsoft productivity tools on the device, your core requirements for security, your antivirus, anything that you require the device to secure it in the environment, and then look at your policies. Then look at exactly what we just mentioned earlier. What is it that I'm trying to go from here? Is the CIS, is it the Central 85 in Australia, whatever you are in the world? What framework do I need to align into? Okay, then my policy set needs to be aligned to that. It's a lot easier, it's a lot cleaner. I'm not saying ignore everything that you've got today, because you've got them there for a reason. You've got all those policies, you've got all those requirements for a reason. I try to shift your mindset from like, why did I change it now? If it works today, why should I? Well, because the world is slowly changing and is moving to that modern endpoint solution. So start moving with the world without obviously disregarding what you've got today on-prem, but start fresh. Try to start from something clean. And then your apps. The apps is the biggest underestimated piece of the puzzle as well in an environment. Every time we go to a client, they're like, oh, we can just move the SOE really quickly. It's just quick and simple. It's like the SOE is just one page. What do your users need access to? What applications? Because that actually defines how quickly you can spin up your environment and roll out a new SOE. Got clarity around the apps and what do they need to do with these apps? Then move the apps. Because what encompasses the SOE of any operating system by that matter when we release it to a client is applications, identity, data security, and policies. Those are the core principles. If someone that is listening wants to take that into account, that is where I will start from and build a roadmap based on those principles.
Amazing.
Yes, very well said, I think.
Yeah. Chris, big thank you to you for bringing Claudia onto the show. And it's been so refreshing to talk about something that doesn't start with A and end with I, and that we can have a set of guidance that is unrelated to how do we do a better prompt. And it's nice because the rest of the world actually still lives in normal infrastructure, and we still need mature infrastructure guidance. We still need to know how do we not run with scissors with the basics of what we need to do, which, to be fair, includes what we're doing on the desktop, what we're doing with identity, what we're doing with patching, and all of these things should be matured and should be maintained. Before we let Claudia go, Claudia, how do you want to be found, or what do you want to plug?
Well, I've got my LinkedIn profile, so anyone who wants to talk to me can talk to me through LinkedIn. Also talk about our business or the company we work for. Arinco is a good place to start for those who are in Australia. I'm part of the Arinco team here in the modern workspace. We do this day to day with our customers. That is our passion here. It is really just make sure that we're doing great by our clients and the work that we do with Microsoft, but it's also to do great by our clients and what suits them and moving forward in this cloud first journey that they do. But yeah, so that's how it can be found, either LinkedIn or through our business at Arinco.
Wonderful.
Perfect. I'll put that LinkedIn profile in the show notes so anyone can find you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Nick. Thanks again, Chris, for inviting me over. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I appreciate
no
it.
problem. Thank you for coming.